Is Turkey on the brink of a massive military offensive against Syria's Kurds? Amidst reports of increased troop movements along the border and growing activity by Turkey's proxy forces in Syria, the possibility of a full-scale assault on Kurdish-held territories seems to be imminent. So, what exactly lies behind the moves, and will anyone be willing to step in to help the Kurds? Hello and welcome. If you're new to the channel, my name is James Ker-Lindsay, and here I take an informed look at international relations, conflict, security and statehood. In international relations, Irredentism refers to efforts by a state or group to claim territories seen as part of its historical or cultural homeland. This often involves bringing in others with shared ethnic, linguistic or religious ties. Needless to say, other countries usually view such ambitions as a fundamental threat to their own territorial integrity. One of the most interesting examples in modern international relations concerns Turkey and the Kurds. For over 4 decades, the Turkish government has been fighting against Kurdish efforts to establish a homeland, either within Turkey or on its borders. And it's against this backdrop that there are now fears that Turkey may be preparing to launch a full-scale invasion to end any efforts to create a Kurdish homeland in neighbouring Syria. The relationship between Turkey and the Kurds has a long and complex history. However, our story really starts after the First World War. As the defeated Ottoman Empire collapsed, a plan was drafted to divide the Anatolian Peninsula between European powers and neighbouring states. This also included the possibility of creating a Kurdish homeland. However, these plans were defeated when Turkish nationalist forces fought back under the leadership of Mustafa Kemal Ataturk. Following the emergence of the Republic of Turkey in 1923, hopes for a Kurdish state died. Instead, the Kurds were left divided between 5 countries: Turkey, where most of them lived, Iran, Iraq, Syria and Armenia. Over the following decades, Kurdish hopes for independence remained a distant prospect. Although there were occasional uprisings in the various countries, any efforts to create their own country were heavily resisted. However, in 1984, a significant new insurgency emerged in Turkey, where the Kurdish Workers' Party, the PKK, launched a campaign for Kurdish independence. Initially based in the rural Kurdish southeast of the country, its violent insurgency soon expanded into Turkey's towns and cities. Meanwhile, the issue gained a broader regional dimension at the start of the 1990s when the Kurdistan Regional Government, the KRG, was established in northern Iraq following the First Gulf War. Aside from raising Turkish fears that this would become the basis for an eventual Kurdish state, the PKK also began to use the mountainous areas as bases to launch attacks on Turkey. But while the PKK's leader Abdullah Öcalan was arrested by Turkey in 1999 and there have been sporadic efforts to reach a peace agreement, Turkey has remained extremely nervous about Kurdish efforts to establish a state, either within its borders or in neighbouring countries, which may then become a focus for further separatism. And it's this that explains what we're now seeing in neighbouring Syria. I hope you're finding this valuable. If so, please do give it a like and perhaps consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. It all really helps. Thanks so much. And now, back to the video. In 2011, the Arab Spring triggered protests across the Middle East, spreading to Syria, where opposition to Bashar al-Assad quickly escalated into a brutal civil war. While Assad's forces battled opposition to his regime in the south, Kurdish groups in northern Syria, led by the PYD and its armed wing, the YPG, seized the opportunity to establish self-rule, eventually declaring the autonomous administration of North and East Syria. From the start, Turkey viewed this development as a significant threat, especially given the PYD's ties to the PKK. But despite its concerns over developments in Syria, there was little Ankara could do to limit Kurdish autonomy, as the rise of ISIS meant that key Western countries, including the United States, were now supporting the Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces, the SDF, in combating Islamic State. Although Turkey staged several operations against the Kurds during this period, they were relatively limited in scope. But by 2019, things were changing. Although ISIS still posed a threat, it had been largely defeated. As a result, following talks with Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, the Trump administration announced the withdrawal of US troops from northern Syria. Seizing on this, Turkey invaded. Known as Operation Peace Spring, the mission served two purposes. As well as establishing a so-called safe zone to pave the way for the repatriation of millions of Syrian refugees living in Turkey, it was also clearly designed to diminish Kurdish control in the north and northeast of Syria. However, the mission had wider ramifications. For a start, it forced the SDF to turn to Russia and the Assad regime for support, thus propping up their power in Syria. It also led to a resurgence of ISIS. With Kurdish forces distracted, Islamist militants used the opportunity to escape the area. As a result, and following significant international diplomatic pressure and even threats of sanctions, Turkey agreed to a ceasefire and withdrew its forces to a 115-kilometre-long strip of Syrian territory lying along its border. Despite this, Turkey kept up the pressure on the Kurds, regularly signalling that another full-scale invasion was possible. For example, in late 2022, speculation again grew after a significant bomb attack in Istanbul was linked to the YPG. Although the mass attack never happened, many observers argued that Turkey was merely looking for the right moment to act. It's against this backdrop that the fall of the Assad regime appears to have opened the way for a Turkish invasion. With Russia now out of the picture and the new HTS administration in Damascus supported by pro-Turkish forces, there are good reasons to believe that Ankara may now see this as the ideal moment to act against the Kurds. To this end, reports are already emerging indicating that Turkey and its allied proxies are preparing a major assault on the Kurdish-held areas in northern and eastern Syria. Of course, if this happens, it will pose a massive threat to the Kurdish areas. Although the Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces have considerable battle experience fighting ISIS, they're stretched thin across a large area. Moreover, Turkey has air power and more artillery. It would also enjoy support from its Syrian proxy forces. To this extent, while Kurdish forces could mount stiff resistance in certain areas, they would almost certainly need help from outside actors. But just where would they get it? First and foremost, attention will turn to the Western countries, particularly the United States. However, Washington faces a very delicate balancing act regarding the Turkish threats to the Kurds. While the US has supported the Kurdish-led SDF in combating ISIS, Turkey is a NATO ally. Historically, the United States has avoided confrontations of this kind with Ankara. For this reason, it's highly doubtful that the US would help the Kurdish areas against a Turkish attack. While Washington undoubtedly sees the Kurds as valuable allies, its response would likely focus on de-escalation rather than military intervention. The best the Kurds could hope for is likely to be a combination of diplomatic pressure, economic sanctions, and calls for restraint. The same would apply to other Western states. Few European countries would want to engage or even have the capacity to do so, even if they were so inclined. A second possibility that's been raised is that Israel might step in to support the Kurds, perhaps by providing air cover. However, this is also unlikely. Although Israel has historically had sympathy for the Kurds, viewing them as a counterbalance to shared adversaries like Iran, Syria and Islamist groups, and has often voiced support for Kurdish aspirations, it will almost certainly stop short of offering direct military assistance if Turkey attacks. Quite apart from the danger of a direct military confrontation with Turkey, which could well escalate in dangerous and unpredictable ways, it would want to avoid a step that would so obviously strain relations with allies like the United States. Instead, any Israeli assistance, if it were to happen, would almost certainly be focused and carefully calibrated to avoid a broader conflict. For example, it may support the Kurds through intelligence sharing. But beyond the West and Israel, the only other likely source of support would be the Iraqi Kurds. But here too, things are complex. While the Kurdish populations share ethnic and cultural ties, the KRG has also been weakened in recent years, teetering on the edge of financial collapse. It also maintains a complex relationship with Turkey. Supporting Syrian Kurds, particularly the YPG, which has been linked to the PKK, could risk these ties. To this end, while Iraqi Kurds may provide humanitarian assistance, it seems unlikely that the KRG will offer significant military support to Syria's Kurds. For all these reasons, Ankara may well calculate that now is the ideal moment to strike against the Kurds. Of course, it may yet back off, especially under sustained international pressure. But if it doesn't, and going on past experiences where many hundreds of thousands were killed, injured and displaced, it will almost certainly lead to a brutal conflict with many casualties. In this sense, far from marking an end to fighting, the new post-Assad era in Syria may see the country enter a new and bloodier phase of fighting. I hope you found that useful. If so, here are some more videos that you might find interesting. Thanks so much for watching, and see you in the next video.